The sound of engines once filled the air, deep, powerful, and unrelenting, echoing not only with mechanical force, but also with ambition and dreams. Those roars represented movement, innovation, and the thrill of creation. Yet, as the years passed, that thunder slowly faded into silence. The man at the center of it all stepped back without explanation, without scandal, and without public collapse. He simply withdrew, leaving behind only quiet traces, small fragments that hinted at a much larger story waiting to be uncovered. Every legacy begins in silence. Not with applause, not with flashing lights, but in the stillness where a child observes, listens, and learns. From that silence, they slowly grow into the person they were always meant to become. In his case, there was no early spotlight, no headlines marking his presence. No one could have predicted that one day he would shape not only machines, but also the very culture surrounding them, transforming how people connected with design, speed, and artistry. This story is not just one of fame or achievement. It is a narrative of resilience, born in the shadows, of quiet battles fought behind closed doors, and of the heavy cost that comes with carrying both inspiration and loss. Behind the polished steel and shining awards, behind the admiration of fans and peers, lies a trail of unseen sacrifices, family burdens carried in silence, private tragedies unspoken, and the weight of expectations that were never put into words. In many ways, the journey is both familiar and extraordinary. It mirrors the path of countless dreamers who stumble, fall, and rise again. Yet it also stands apart because of the choices made along the way, the silent conflicts endured, and the refusal to let failure mark the end. His story is not just the journey of a man. It is the journey of determination itself, a demonstration of how one life can shape an entire craft and how sometimes silence speaks louder than words ever could. He was born into a world where machines were not merely tools. They were extensions of creativity, physical symbols of progress and imagination. His father was a craftsman of rare talent, a man who carried the deep knowledge of fabrication, design, and precision in his very hands. The workshop was more than a workplace. It was a stage where sparks lit the air, where the smell of paint lingered, and where ideas were brought to life in metal. And chrome, from the earliest days of childhood, weekends meant something different for him. While other children played outdoors, his playground was the shop floor. Instead of swings and slides, his world was filled with tools, frames, and half-finished projects. He watched his father's hands at work, absorbing lessons without words, lessons about patience, balance, and the delicate relationship between design and function. By the time most children were still fumbling with toys, he was already holding real tools with purpose. Learning responsibility step by step, at just 7 years old, was trusted with his first small responsibilities, tasks that might have seemed simple to others but were, in truth, the foundation of discipline. He didn't work for praise, he worked for wages. 17 cents an hour may have been a symbolic amount, but it instilled in him a deep respect for labor. By the age of 12, his skills had already surpassed those of many adults. That year, he completed his first real paint job on a Porsche 356. It wasn't a child's sketch or a playful experiment. It was a professional task, entrusted to him because his family recognized that he carried a natural fluency with machines and artistry. But no childhood story is without shadows. Among his siblings was a sister, vibrant, full of spirit, yet fragile. She was born with a condition that aged her before her time. Her laughter, though bright, always carried with it the quiet knowledge that her life would be short. When she passed away at just 16, the household fell into a silence deeper than any before. He rarely spoke about the loss because words were unnecessary. Instead, grief reshaped him from within, teaching him how brief life could be and impressing on him the urgency to create before everything slipped away. Years later, whispers suggested that many of his designs carried hidden tributes to her. Curve here, a line there, subtle details that no outsider could fully decode, but that meant everything to him. Quietly, he He also became a donor to research foundations dedicated to her condition. His support was not for recognition, but for remembrance. Even in grief, life kept moving. He finished school and reached his first great crossroad. What path to take? He could have chosen to walk away from engines and steel entirely, but destiny had already been forged in the heat of his father's workshop. 1982, despite limited resources, he enrolled at the prestigious Art Center College of Design. For him, this was more than school. It was a gateway into the world of industrial design at its highest level. It was the chance to prove that imagination could be turned into form, but dreams always demand payment. 2 years into the program, financial pressure forced him to leave. The disappointment was crushing, not only because of the lost opportunity, but also because it confirmed his fear that perhaps the world beyond the workshop wasn't ready to accept him. He took work wherever he could. At Clean Coachworks, a company specializing in vintage-style cars. He found tasks to keep his hands occupied, though his ambitions starved. He painted, repaired, and supported projects, but none of it felt like creation. Outside of steady work, he survived through freelance illustration jobs, small restoration gigs, and occasional commissions. None were consistent, none were enough. This period of life was not defined by growth, but by survival. Doubts crept in, heavy and persistent. The industry seemed unwilling to open its doors, and then came the turning point. Not from a mentor or a school, but from his partner, Lynn. Where he saw failure, she saw potential. Where he felt blocked by obstacles, she found solutions. Through her encouragement, and more importantly, through her financial sacrifice, returned to the art center. This time, he vowed not to falter. Every hour was poured into design. Every project was a step closer to proving himself. In 1990, he graduated with honors. The diploma was more than a certificate. It was a passport into the professional world he had chased since childhood, fresh from graduation. He split his time between Sternberger Design and a workshop known as Hot Rods by Boyd. It was there, under Boyd's leadership, that his real journey began. At first, he was just another designer with ideas, but his vision quickly separated him from the rest. He had an instinct for proportion, balance, and style, creating designs that were both timeless and modern. By 1993, he wasn't simply an employee anymore. He was design director, then president of the company. Under his guidance, the shop produced legends: the Boydster, the Boydster II, the Roadster, the Sports Star, even when his name wasn't front. In center, his influence was undeniable. Industry insiders began whispering about the Boyd look: clean lines, simplified proportions, modern materials, all unmistakably touched by his vision. Recognition soon followed. In 1997, he became the youngest person ever inducted into the Hot Rod Hall of Fame at SEMA, but success always carries cracks beneath the surface. While the cars dazzled, the company's finances faltered. Contracts failed, payroll became uncertain, and soon the once mighty workshop stood on unsteady ground. For him, the struggles weren't just business, they were personal. Weeks went by without pay, and with his wife expecting their first child, the family faced frightening financial strain. At one point, their bank account held only $700. By 1,998, Hot Rods by Boyd declared bankruptcy. For him, it was more than the fall of a company. It was the collapse of a mentorship, of trust built over years. He chose to leave, and with almost nothing left, founded his own workshop, Foose Design. In Huntington Beach, a few loyal team members followed him, building something new from almost nothing, yet the departure created lasting tension. Boyd, already weakened by financial loss, carried quiet resentment. Neither man ever spoke publicly against the other, but their silence told the story. For nearly a decade, they never acknowledged one another. In 2008, Boyd passed away after surgery. His former protege made no public statement. No photographs appeared of him at the funeral. Whether he offered private condolences, no one knew. The silence between them ended only with death, unresolved and eternal. Foose design, however, slowly grew into something far greater than a workshop. It became a symbol of resilience, proof that independence could be forged from necessity. Each project wasn't just a car, but a narrative, evidence that he could stand alone, succeed alone, and rise without a mentor's shadow. His designs earned worldwide acclaim. Through television shows, exhibitions, and magazines, his work reached audiences far beyond garages and racetracks. His style became synonymous with elegance and innovation. Clients came not only for cars, but for the assurance that every line and every curve carried meaning. Foose design thrived, even while whispers of the past never fully faded. Some saw the company as a phoenix, born from the ashes of Boyd's downfall. Others saw it as quiet rebellion, the declaration of independence after years of silence. But for him, it was neither revenge nor rebellion. It was survival turned into success. Because legacies are never built only on triumphs. They are shaped equally by the shadows that accompany them. His story cannot be told without first acknowledging the silence that lingered for years between mentor and student. That silence was not just the absence of words, but a powerful presence. In itself, carrying with it unspoken lessons, unresolved tensions, and quiet respect. His journey also cannot be understood without recognizing the deeply private losses that fueled his determination to move forward, or without noting the countless sacrifices that ultimately shaped his resilience. He never once tried to erase the past, nor did he attempt to rewrite it into something more flattering. Instead, he carried the weight of those experiences with him everywhere he went. Sometimes this history appeared in the flowing lines of a car, and sometimes it surfaced in his quiet refusal to speak of things that could never be fully mended. The wider world often remembers him for the awards, the iconic cars, and the recognition. But those who dared to look closer always noticed something else: the sheer determination of a man who refused to surrender, the quiet dignity of someone who rebuilt from nothing, and the silence that defined both his conflicts and his moments of closure. And so, when the engines roar again, they do not sound like mere echoes of the past. They roar as proof that even silence, when carried with strength, can build a lasting legacy. Success, however, always brings admiration, along with a price few are truly prepared to pay. With the rise of his design empire came interviews, cameras, and the relentless spotlight that followed him into spaces of his life that had once been private. Fans admired his brilliance. Clients were willing to wait months just to secure his time, and television networks lined up to capture every detail of his creative process. Yet fame, he soon discovered, is not a shield, it is a magnifying glass. Every achievement was celebrated with enthusiasm, but every delay, every flaw, and every misstep was equally magnified. For a man who had spent most of his career working in silence and solitude, the sudden noise of constant attention felt strange and unfamiliar. The television projects made him a household name, but they also chained him to strict deadlines that often clashed with the meticulous, patient nature of his craft. What had once been purely a labor of love risked turning into a staged performance meant to satisfy an audience. His staff frequently worked late into the night, trying to balance the constant demands of cameras with the uncompromising standards he insisted upon. Privately, the pressure weighed heavily on him. Friends would later remark that while he smiled brightly for the cameras, behind closed doors, he often carried exhaustion deep in his eyes. For a man who had already endured both financial collapse and personal tragedy, the spotlight was at once a precious gift and a heavy burden. Beyond the noise of fame and recognition, his greatest contribution was never any single car. Rather, it was the philosophy that guided his every design. He believed that design was about far more than aesthetics. It was a form of storytelling. Every curve had a purpose, every proportion reflected balance, and every detail carried the echo of a memory. He once described cars as moving sculptures, a phrase that perfectly captured the way he approached his work. For him, steel was never cold or lifeless. It was alive, capable of expressing elegance, speed, and even emotion. This philosophy set him apart from many others in the field. While many builders obsessed over raw power, speed, and brute force, he sought harmony, ensuring that performance never overshadowed beauty. In doing so, he created a style instantly recognizable as his own. For the many students who looked up to him, his lesson was always clear. A true designer does not merely build machines, a true designer builds legacies. While his name remained most closely tied to custom vehicles, his influence spread much further. Design schools analyzed his work as examples of modern craftsmanship. Younger builders cited him not only as a source of creative inspiration, but also as a model of resilience in the face of hardship. He became a living symbol of perseverance. In lectures and public appearances, he reminded students that failure was never an ending, it was a test of resolve. His own journey, which included dropping out of school, facing bankruptcy, and ultimately building an internationally recognized brand, stood as living proof of that truth. Beyond the auto industry, his quiet philanthropy continued, though rarely publicized. His support for medical research and community initiatives revealed a man who measured success not only by the trophies on his shelf, but also by what he gave back to others. His legacy, then, was not confined to garages or workshops. It lived in classrooms, in charities, and in the quiet determination of those who followed his example. No journey, he often reminded others, is built alone. Behind every breakthrough lies the influence of mentors, those who guide, inspire, and sometimes challenge us in ways we never forget. For him, the advice and encouragement of veterans in the industry offered a compass during his uncertain early years. When Alex Tremulous, the legendary designer with roots at Tucker, crossed paths with him, the meeting was more than casual. Recognized in the young man a spark, a hunger to create. His encouragement became a crucial factor in pursuing formal education at the Art Center College of Design. Later, at Hot Rods by Boyd, mentorship took on an entirely different form. Boyd Coddington was not merely a boss, he was both teacher and rival. Their collaboration produced vehicles that defined an entire era of custom design. Yet, the very same relationship that built his career also tested it. The silence that eventually grew between them was not born of disrespect, but rather of the unspoken complexities that can form between mentor and protege. Mentors, after all, leave lessons. In two ways, through guidance and through absence. Both shaped him equally, teaching him not only what to build, but also how to stand tall when the support was gone. Behind the success, cameras and engines lay the quieter story of personal sacrifice. His wife Lynn was more than just a partner. She was the anchor that steadied him through countless storms. When he struggled financially, it was her unwavering belief and even her financial support that kept his education alive. Later, as his design business demanded long hours and an almost unrelenting focus, it was her patience that kept their family from unraveling. Raising children while building a global reputation was no simple task. Friends recalled nights when he worked well past midnight, endlessly sketching, revising, and perfecting designs. While precious family moments slipped quietly by, though he provided for a better future, the cost was often measured in time lost. He rarely spoke publicly about these sacrifices, but those closest to him knew the weight he carried. To the world, he was a visionary designer. At home, he was simply a husband and father, struggling to balance the demands of duty and passion. In many ways, this very tension defined him just as much as his career as the years passed. His influence stretched far beyond the American custom car scene. International auto shows began inviting him as a guest of honor. His designs appeared in magazines across Europe and Asia, where they were praised for seamlessly merging classic lines with modern innovation. In Japan, collectors admired the precision of his work, noting how it reflected their own cultural philosophy of craftsmanship. In Europe, designers studied his cars for their rare ability to blend timeless elegance with raw performance. Even in regions where hot rods were not traditionally part of car culture, his creations were seen as artmobile sculptures that transcended mere function. This global recognition reaffirmed a powerful truth: creativity knows no borders. It speaks a universal language. Running a design house, however, demanded much more than creativity. It required leadership. For someone whose true love lay in sketching and building, the responsibilities of managing a business brought their own challenges. Budgets, deadlines, and staffing constantly demanded attention. There were moments, he admitted privately, when the weight of leadership pulled him away from pure creation. Yet he also understood that to sustain a lasting legacy, he could not remain only an artist. He had to become a leader as well. Balancing these two roles became one of the greatest tests of his life. What makes his story endure is not just the cars, but their timelessness. Decades after their creation, many of his designs still look as striking as the day they first appeared. Unlike trends that fade, his work carried a unique balance of tradition and modernity that ensured longevity. Collectors continue to prize his vehicles not only for their craftsmanship, but also for the deep sense of history they embody. Each car feels like a bridge between Aerosé's past influences reimagined for the future. Every designer eventually faces the same question: innovate boldly or respect tradition? For him, the answer was always both. He believed innovation without roots was meaningless, and tradition without imagination was stagnant. In his sketches, one could clearly see the influence of past masters, the long hoods of classic roadsters, the graceful arcs of mid-century lines. But layered over those influences was always his unique reinterpretation, enhanced with modern materials, advanced engineering, and unexpected detailing. This careful balance set him apart. While others chased fleeting trends, he built vehicles that honored the past while anticipating the future. His work stood as proof that innovation does not erase tradition, it completes it. No single man can bring every dream into reality. Throughout his career, he relied on collaborations with fabricators, engineers, painters, and craftsmen. Each partnership brought fresh expertise, and together they shaped cars that carried many signatures beneath one vision. Some collaborations were well known, others discreet. A few partners even followed him loyally from one workshop to another, standing by him during uncertain times. Their stories became intertwined with his, even if their names never reached the headlines. He never claimed sole ownership of his success. In interviews, he was quick to credit his team as much as himself. This humility only deepened the respect he earned within the community. Television, however, changed everything. What had once been the quiet work of garages and private shows became a spectacle broadcast to millions. His appearances on popular automotive programs introduced his name to households far beyond the world of car enthusiasts. This visibility carried immense benefits: new clients, wider recognition, but it also transformed him into a figure of pop culture. His face became as recognizable as his cars. Children sketched drawings inspired by his shows. Collectors lined up for autographs with the same eagerness they had for his vehicles. The spotlight elevated him, but it also forced him to carry the endless expectations of an audience. Always hungry for more, recognition poured in steadily, from early inductions into halls of fame to prestigious awards at international exhibitions. His shelves filled with honors, each one reflecting not only his craftsmanship, but also the respect of peers who understood the true difficulty of his journey. Among the most memorable milestones were the occasions when he stood as the youngest ever recipient of certain honors, a reminder of just how quickly he had risen to prominence. Yet, despite all this, he rarely lingered on accolades. For him, the awards were not the destination, they were simply markers along a much larger road.